And well, last night was a turd of a game, huh?
Yeah, right.
We were just talking about
Miserable.
it. Yeah, I don't know if the word turd is used enough, right?
Makes you giggle, right? Turd
It does.
Ferguson.
Turd Ferguson, you stand out like a turd in a punch bowl. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know, it's just one of those things.
yeah. And it has a very specific meaning. See, in the whole spectrum of low grade insults, there's a difference between a turd and a doofus, for instance.
I would say a maroon, like Bugs Bunny. And what a maroon.
Right.
All right, let's do this thing in 3, 2, 1. Well, you've made it to week 8 so far, and your fantasy team needs some help, and that's why we are here. It's the week 8 Waiver Wire show on the Audible. Cecil, Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Dr. Jene Bramel kicking things off. And because I miss seeing Dr. Jene, I have a special little photo for him. And thank you, Brian. And also kicking it off with the injured QBs here in week 8.
Hello, guys. New injury this week at the quarterback spot is Zach Wilson, who sprained the PCL in his right knee. The early timetable is 2 to 4 weeks, but Wilson said he already felt some instability in that knee, and this could easily drag on a little bit longer than that. We'll see whether or not the Jets choose to put him on injured reserve. Either way, 2 weeks minimum and definitely out this week. Dak Prescott is hopeful to recover from his right calf strain. He's already out of the walking boot. The Cowboys expect him to return to practice at some time this week. The expectation is that he'll be able to play. Trey Lance, still dealing with an MCL sprain in his left knee, has a chance to return to practice, but Jimmy Garoppolo has already been named the starter for the Niners this week. Baker Mayfield is going to try to come back from those multiple shoulder dislocations and fracture within the shoulder socket that he has. Mayfield's tough and trying to play through the injury. We'll see whether or not he's got the range of motion and strength in his non-throwing shoulder to be able to play. Taysom Hill still dealing with a concussion. Russell Wilson, the target for him to return is still week 10. Looks like he's going to have the pin removed this week, and then they'll start working on range of motion and see whether or not he's in too much pain to throw. Week 10 is going to be the earliest he's going to be able to recover, just based on his eligibility to return from injured reserve. We'll see whether or not he can make it at that timetable or not. Ryan Fitzpatrick, still on crutches, dealing with right hip issues. At least a month from returning, it could already be a season-ending situation. Tyrod Taylor looks like he's going to return to practice from his hamstring strain, be designated to return, but we'll watch practice participation from him this week. The Texans have said he'll regain the starting job when he is healthy enough to play.
Yes, and I give a Keanu kiss to Brian for making that, also because our viewers, our commenters, Axel, right? I'm here for Keanu.
Right.
Aren't we all here for Keanu? In a way, right?
I mean, Theodore, Ted Logan came into our lives, I think, depending on what age you are, and representative of vibes. He's before people said it's a vibe. He's a vibe.
He's a vibe. Speaking of vibe, Deshaun Watson, that's not the good vibe.
Yeah.
But there is word that he will be dealt. The trade deadline is next week. Miami, Carolina, and yes, even Denver. I know he doesn't want to come here. Because every time that I'll like retweeting Rappaport, somebody will be like, but it said it didn't work. Yes, okay. I understand that, but Denver is on the list. They may be third on that list, but they're on that list. Carolina, Miami, certainly interested in Deshaun Watson, leading off the discussion of Waiver Wire QBs this week.
Yeah, and little step back. Let's step back for a second. Like Diego, what's up, Diego? He's 1-6. I've got Texas Jawlers are 1-6. The Hall of Fame League, just everything's going wrong. Everything's breaking wrong. It's been 3 games on Monday night that the probability said the Jawlers should have won, and they lost. Whatever. We're all, it's hard. This is the first point in the season, Cease, where I think you can look at your team and be like, my team's not going anywhere this year. This team isn't going to do diddly, But you have to keep fighting and clawing because you're still in the story. And in the story, being the spoiler is also fun. Giving a team on their way to the playoffs a black eye. Also, maybe, making it harder for people on the waiver wire, right? Like using your waiver wire dollars and, up the challenge. So I think that I want to say, because I'm saying to myself, Cease, right now, this is a rousing. This isn't a very good rousing rah-rah speech, but that's where we are on the waiver wire. Part of it is, Cease, part of it is too, I wanted to say this morning. I wanted to speak to the people listening right now, as I do, but I'm speaking like directly to you right now. Like, I know that not all of you are listening to this for waiver wire advice. Maybe not even most of you. I don't know, Cease.
Not at that point yet. Not at that point yet.
Well, but what I mean is, like, I know that, hey, Cease, I know for a fact that there are some people that listen to the show still that don't play fantasy football, what I'm trying to get at is the Waiver Wire show is like the most nuts and bolts fantasy football show. A lot of the stuff we do is like just football talk that happens to be also about fantasy football. But we're talking Waiver Wire, and it's part of the reason I'm dancing around this is because of just how thorny this Deshaun Watson thing is. I also feel like parenthetically I need to say, as I've said many times before, it's your team, it's fantasy football, you're the GM, that's the point. So run your organization the way you want to. And I understand a lot of people saying, I don't care about Deshaun Watson this year in fantasy football. I don't know if I'm ever going to care about him again. However, like you said, Cease, I mean, look, doesn't it feel like we're all being kind of prepared for the idea, well, not the idea, the actuality of Deshaun Watson playing this year? Does it feel like that to you, Cease?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the NFL is pretty predictable and linear in the way they work these PR situations, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
so when it's NFL Network saying he won't be suspended if he's not charged with a felony, if he gets traded, he can play, then here we are.
They're floating that.
I'm not saying it's 100% it's going to happen, or 50%, or 10, or even 5%, but it's not 0% that Deshaun Watson's going to suit up for probably Carolina, right? Isn't it fascinating the movement of the planet cease just as Sam Darnold is benched? Whoa, here's the story about the Deshaun Watson trade closing in.
But
right?
Matt Rule then saying he's our quarterback.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we would project. And it sets off a lot of interesting possibilities like DJ Moore. Oh, boy, what would DJ Moore become? And again, I get it if you're hearing this and it's like, it's gross. Why are we even talking about this? I don't care about picturing Deshaun Watson right now on a football field and what ripple effects it could have. But it certainly would change the complexion of this offense in Carolina. And I think that's got to be the team that's considered the favorite in terms of prognosticating where he would end up. Like you said, Cease, Denver third in that mix. And then Miami, which is, well, I don't know. We'll see. What was the word? Like Stephen Ross, in Peter King's column, it said Stephen Ross is not actively pushing for it. So that doesn't sound to me like, that's like a distant second, right?
Yeah.
So in fantasy football, I mean, maybe he's been carried previously last week when the talks picked up, maybe in 2-quarterback superflex, but he can absolutely be a season changer because one of the things that I was pondering this morning, knowing that we were going to lead off with Watson, is it possible that Houston was holding him back? You know, I mean, I know he had DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, but I'm just talking about the organization, the coaching. Now, I'm not saying Carolina is going to necessarily be an upgrade. Joe Brady is an interesting name to have paired up with Deshaun Watson, but from a football standpoint, I do think Watson's the kind of quarterback that can probably step right in and within a week or two be Deshaun Watson. So from a fantasy standpoint, I think he will definitely be an asset if he plays this year.
Yeah, yep. And that's a good thing to think because, well, Bill O'Brien. Right.
Right.
Bill O'Brien. We have Tom Savage. We're fine. We're totally fine. Let's move on to Carson Wentz at 15 to 30%. Derek Carr is 10 to 20%. Tua Tagovailoa, so long as the Dolphins don't trade for Deshaun, is to 10 to 20% as well.
Yeah, and these ones, and again, folks, let me know, now that I have access to the Yahoo percentage owned numbers, I have a number in my head like 60%. It's pretty wild, actually, some of the names. If it's on this list, then in Yahoo leagues, that player's available in at least 30%, but maybe I'm underestimating how many Yahoo leagues are ghost ships at this point. But there's a lot of quarterbacks, starting with Carson Wentz, and this talk can also double for buy low advice or just where we're at on players as we go through them. And Carson Wentz, in the monsoon, had a good fantasy game. He's going to be facing AFC South defenses like Tennessee this week. Yeah, sign me up for that. Derek Carr goes into his bye, so you can't use him this week. But since we keep talking about that weight lifted from this offense, from this team, and how they're performing, and really Carr's just resuming the form he was in earlier in the year. Tua putting up numbers. Isn't it wild that he's putting up numbers, and from a standpoint of where's his career going, we're still just as clueless, we're just as flummoxed. But from a fantasy, he's arrived. It sounds like Jalen Hurts, right? I'll tell you who we're not confused about, Cease, Mac Jones. And as we go through these quarterbacks that probably aren't out there in a lot of leagues, you do see Mac Jones turning the corner here. And there's a whole other Thursday night talk radio topic here of Mac Jones being out of these rookie quarterbacks, the one coming out of the smelling like a rose, and then rounding up Tyrod Taylor, who we've been talking about. So, this is kind of like, not a lot of nutritional value for fantasy football because a lot of these guys aren't out there in a lot of leagues. But looking out there in public leagues, at least, and again, this stuff runs the apps. Some of these players are out there, and it's interesting to watch the quarterbacks' fortunes rise and fall no matter what.
Yeah, I think, Michael Gallup's available in like 50% of leagues. You know what I mean? There's no way, but there's a lot of leagues with smaller benches and all those sorts of things. So we'll talk about Gallup coming up in a little bit. We got a few quarterbacks left. You skipped straight to the 7 to 15, Bloom.
Sorry, I lost my place on the page.
Matt Ryan is 5 to 10%. And then Case Keenum, we'll talk about him. And let's wrap it up with Kyle Allen and, yes, Joe Flacco.
Right. And I debated putting Chad Henne. I think Mahomes is okay. PJ Walker, he was just a lot worse than Darnold. At the bottom, of course, is your 2 quarterback superflex leagues, preemptive pickups. And I don't know if Mike White is supposed to start this week or not, but I think we could see Flacco in that game, even if White starts, if he plays like he did. And Kyle Allen out. Ryan Fitzpatrick still on crutches. Oh, man. You know, I really was hoping to see him this year for longer than a half. Matt Ryan, I mean, Arizona, Atlanta's comfortable in their offense right now. Kyle Pitts is comfortable. Cordell Patterson is comfortable no matter what they ask him to do. I still continue to be in awe this season, just to show people how strange reality is and how. See, imagine if we were going to go back in time to August and someone said, Cordero Patterson is going to be one of the cornerstones of the Atlanta offense. They're going to use him as a running back. Sometimes he's going to get 15 carries in a game and get rushing touchdowns. They're going to use him as a receiver. Sometimes he's going to get 3 touchdowns in a game as a receiver. They're just going to use him all over the field and all over the offense. You say, come on. Yeah, right. But here we are. Matt Ryan is definitely benefiting from that. Case Keenum, and for fantasy, Case Keenum's like, whatever. Except in 2 quarterback superflex leagues, he's had depth. But see, this touches off what I think is a big conversation, and I feel like an inevitability about it. Is Baker Mayfield going to get that big contract? Because the better Case Keenum plays when Mayfield's out, the better case there is against giving Baker the money, but it just feels like they're going to do it anyway.
Nah, maybe not. We'll say that every day. By the way, who was it earlier in the chat room here? Because you're starting a mystery. I think it was Andrew that asked.
Oh, it's like
you're starting a mystery. Yeah, it was like, why do you have like either that's one of the shower, little loofahs, right?
No,
or it's like a hair thing to put in your hair.
Yeah.
It's a scrunchie for your hair.
Yeah, I actually have these are in every color, and I wear them. No one's ever said anything about it except one time at the casino here in New Orleans. This big muscle-bound dude was like, "Nice scrunchy."
He said that?
He said that.
He wanted to take you back to his room. There you go. That's what that means. That's code. Musclehead code. Let's get to the code of injuries at the waiver wire position. Of course, injuries at the running back position, which means Dr. Jene Bramel joins us once again to talk about those banged up RBs in week 8.
Looks like we'll get a couple of running backs back this week. Saquon Barkley has a chance to return from an ankle injury. He's not been able to practice for the last couple of weeks, but there seems to be a little bit of optimism in him returning. Still got him slightly to the doubtful side of questionable, but there's going to be a chance he'll be able to recover. The news is better on Nick Chubb dealing with a calf injury, and Josina Anderson on Monday reported that as long as there are no setbacks in practice, the Browns are hopeful and expect to be able to get Chubb back this week. Kareem Hunt will still be missing some time on injured reserve. Miles Sanders dealing with what looks like a low ankle sprain. A little disappointing for the Eagles that he was not able to return. Not sure whether he was in pain or had a lot of swelling immediately after the injury. It's not the type of situation that you'd normally expect to keep a player out multiple weeks, but as we've seen with Saquon Barkley, sometimes these injuries can be significant enough where they cost players some time. So consider him questionable. We're still watching to see what the Eagles are going to do with him in practice. Latavius Murray dealing with an ankle injury that he wasn't able to play with last week. The Ravens are on bye. There's a good chance that Murray will be able to return in week 9. Same goes for Josh Jacobs and Peyton Barber, neither of which were able. Barber was inactive, and then Jacobs was unable to finish the game with injuries out there for the Raiders. Those players are on bye, and we'll see where we go. Malcolm Brown dealing with a quad injury is expected to be put on injured reserve by Miami by this week. Tevin Coleman dealing with a hamstring strain. Lots of players that we're still watching to recover. Christian McCaffrey and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, neither of them are eligible until week 9. Both of them may need a little bit extra time to recover, but there is some optimism around both of their teams that they'll only miss the 3 weeks on injured reserve and be able to come back. A little bit more optimism around Edwards-Helaire than there was immediately after his injury, so we'll see how that goes. David Montgomery is eligible to return this week, but that had the look of a 5 to 6 week injury. May not see Montgomery until after the Bears bye, and that would put his return around week 11. We're going to keep an eye on whether or not the Bears have much to say about him this week. He is eligible to return to practice as soon as this week, but doesn't look like Chicago is going to be able to do that. Jeff Wilson update and his meniscus repair back from May. John Lynch told reporters that Wilson was still a couple of weeks away from returning to practice. They're still looking at November at the earliest for him, and it could be closer to the end of the month than the middle. So we'll see how that progresses.
We'll see how that progresses and how that goes, but he mentions Jeff Wilson, Bloom, which leads off the top of your running back list. Upgrades, downgrades, waiver wire report available at footballguys.com by himself. Elijah Mitchell at 50+%. Swing your sword, fire your cannonballs or your bullets, whatever. Get him.
Yeah, and again, it might not be compelling waiver wire content for those of you in the typical leagues like we play in, but he's out there in some leagues because people get impatient. The interesting story that we follow here, Cecil, is he starts out the year as the number one back as a bit of a surprise, and they meant it. You know, not that Trey Sermon did a lot, maybe against Seattle, but he didn't really do a lot to make them think twice about that. JaMychal Hasty is in a small role. Now, the next question is what happens when Jeff Wilson comes back, but that's still a ways away. The more interesting conversation here again, Cease, and this just shows, this is my 1-in-16 mind wandering, is Kyle Shanahan. Feels like there's finally a shift in the narrative to what Jason Wood, what up, Jason? I got to get him on the couch soon, has been saying all along, which is maybe Kyle Shanahan isn't a good head coach, you know? And now, I don't know. Somebody replied to me when I put out this up, Cease, that Jed York is, you know, more like he called him a bro's bro, and he and Kyle Shanahan are tight, and it doesn't matter. But certainly the thought is out there, Cease, now more than I think than ever before after that game on Sunday night that maybe he's just not a good person to run an organization.
Yeah, well, they're going to bounce back this week, so we'll table that talk for a week and just go to Trey Sermon. I don't want to turn this into as a Kyle Shanahan a good coach show because that could be, we could do at least an hour.
Yeah.
But like, go to Trey Sermon, dude. It's all about fit in the NFL, and Jimmy Garoppolo just doesn't fit. Put Sermon in, take teams by surprise, and make a run. You could still do that. So maybe I'm biased, but yeah, Kyle Shanahan, he could be better with a different quarterback, Trey Lance. Thank you very much. Let's get in there. Myles Gaskin, 25 to 50%. He's on, he's off, he's on, he's back on for now. I'm not really going to rush out and get him, Bloom. But maybe you need some help, 25 to 50%. Kenyon Drake, 20 to 40%. And Freedom, he's being used because John Gruden is gone. Khalil Herbert, 15 to 30%, as we saw that split with Damian Williams back. And it wasn't much for Williams, so Herbert's there, and he'll make you think, maybe Montgomery, doesn't have to be back until after the Bears bye, right? So we'll talk about Khalil Herbert. Let's do those three before we jump to the next group.
And again, players that probably aren't out there in a lot of leagues, but are out there at least in a few people listening or using our app. We can still talk about Myles Gaskin, and I guess this is one of those, hey, trust the ADP special in the sense that we knew there was something there with Gaskin, maybe not something that we're really coveting or is going to make our season, but when he's gotten the opportunity this year, he's been, from a fantasy standpoint, very productive in terms of turning his touches into fantasy points, especially because he's a receiver mostly out of the backfield on a team that doesn't really commit to the run. Well, now Malcolm Brown's out, so on IR. So this is opening that window for him, and this is a strangely productive fantasy offense, even though it doesn't feel like the team's going anywhere. Drake is playing well. I know they're going into their bye. Jacobs, as Dr. Gene said, probably will be healthy, but how long cease before Jacobs is on the injury report again, right?
Next week.
I know. So, and Drake is producing even on the limited touches he's getting because he looks good. He looks like good Kenyon Drake at Vegas, a team that's rising. Khalil Herbert, and if he wasn't on the miserable Bears offense. See, so we watch some bad offenses every year, right? Like, no doubt. We watch some really bad offenses. But there are bad offenses that you watch and you think, well, if that's what you have, it's going to be a bad offense. And we're not necessarily surprised. It's still, you trudge through watching these offenses. But the Bears feel like they're bad and they don't have to be this bad. That it's painful to watch, but not Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert is running and making a name for himself, and against Tampa Bay even. So again, none of these guys out there, but all of them their own version of the story of how running back value falls, rises, and takes these turns that are seemingly unpredictable every year.
Kenneth Gainwell is 12 to 25%. Some fantasy jams may be like, well, I want him more than Myles Gaskin. Fine, go for it. Dearness Johnson, Nick Chubb is going to be back this week, but 10 to 20% for Johnson, who's done enough to earn a larger role even when Chubb is back. Chubb and Hunt back, then Johnson goes to the bench. But anyway, Samaje Perine, 7 to 15% as well. And Devontae Booker, 5 to 10%, even though we may see Saquon Barkley back too.
Yeah, we go through these guys, and now we're getting to the players that may be out there for you. Kenneth Gainwell. And see, this is one of those things where Boston Scott, much lower than Kenneth Gainwell, in my estimation, because even if Scott gets more of the early down work, or Scott is the player that, what do we say when he steps into Miles Sanders' role? Not that that's been fantasy gold. I just see Gainwell, first of all, he's been scoring in those situations in the red zone, but also he can do more with his touches. So there's going to be opportunity for as long as Sanders is out. And against Detroit this week, you're a little more eager, not that it's by Mageddon like last week, but you might want to take a chance on one or both of these guys. So I'm saying Gainwell over Scott, but I'd be interested to hear what you say. Scott, of course, an old Matt Waldman favorite. Dearness Johnson, can we just take a moment, Cease, to say this is a great story? Everybody's loving this, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the person, Dearness Johnson, the person. Every now and then, Andrew Hawkins comes to mind. Sending good vibes out there to Hawk. What's up, man? So we come across these players in the NFL who truly got there on the power of their faith in themselves, their belief in themselves. Because the universe, the football gods were saying no over and over and over and over again. Lance Moore, right? James Harrison. The football gods say no.
Bernie Parmalee, who was a UPS driver before he broke through with the Dolphins.
Right. You're not good enough. Kurt Warner. J.J. Watt, delivering the pizzas, right? Even J.J. Watt.
And crying when someone at a party is like, you were like a stud in high school.
You were once, weren't you great once?
Why are you delivering my pizza?
Yeah. So Dearness Johnson, absolutely one of those guys. And he had his moment on a Thursday night. You saw it in how his teammates were responding to him. So now he's the number 2 back. He had 13 for 95 as the number 2 back last year, or was when Nick Chubb got hurt during the game. The point is, he works in the system. And I think we've been telling the story for the last few weeks. This is not the first week we brought up Dearness Johnson. Hopefully, if you listen to the show, you got him, because we said, hey, he looks like he knows how to run in the system. And that's what's important. Not your speed, not your 3-cone. No. Do you know how to run in the system? And he sure does. Samaje Perine's back off the Koof list and finishing games, going the dagger. That was awesome. How can we not root for the Bengals? Devontae Booker, hey, garbage time against the Panthers, so garbage time counts the same. And Giants play Kansas City this week. Why not? I would love to see the Giants mess around and stagger this Kansas City team again, in the sense of watching Daniel Jones. I'm kind of becoming a Daniel Jones fan, Cease. I kind of am. I mean, I want to see this come together. I want to see this offense come together around him, because he's a fun quarterback when he's not in that blind spot of his game, his lack of that clock or that sense of self-preservation in the pocket. Otherwise, he's a really fun quarterback to watch. They have a lot of really fun players around him, and Booker could benefit from that.
He's one of those players that has to go somewhere else, though.
Yeah.
Or Judge has to get fired.
Right, level the organization around him.
He has to survive to that next coaching staff. And you only love him, too, because you invented the name Steely Dan for him.
I did. Oh, well,
and our friend Peter Schrager even said on air, on NFL Network, he quotes Sigmund Bloom.
I didn't actually invent that, but I would love to be attached to
No. You're supposed to do what Mark Schlereth does, right? And I will listen to Mark Schlereth broadcast, and I will hear things that I've told him to say, and he doesn't give me any credit, which is fine. But here's what Stink does. He gives you credit the first time.
Yeah.
Second time, it's just his. He just runs with it. So, yeah, Steely Dan, that's yours.
Hey, I'm happy to be associated with them.
We talked about Brandon Bolden enough. I think in the recap show, what it is, it's a one-off game plan every week for New England. Right. So I think if you're trying to mine some fantasy gold with Brandon Bolden, you'll come up with some fool's gold based on the game plan. So what's Belichick got in plan? Is it Ramondre Stevenson week? It's always Damon Harris's week. Where's Brandon Bolden fit the mix and J.J. Taylor kicking around? So, Yeah, I mean, the Patriots backfield is a discussion, Bloom, but that's why Brandon is a 1%er.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you never know. It could be a Brandon Bolden week, and it could even be a Brandon Bolden week. Like last week, if Damian Harris had gotten dinged, Bolden probably would have become the lead back, or at least his touches would have gone up, but he was more than viable last week. What it really gives me a chance to bring up is Tom Curran, who's been around these parts for a long time, before the game really just broadcast that the Jets just cannot handle receiving running backs. And he thought it was going to be J.J. Taylor, but the analysis was spot on. Spot on.
And you love that. We talked about it in the recap show, Bloom, but you love that when reporters become analysts.
Well, they know their team.
There's a lot of reporters that are lazy and just like, I don't know football. Like, I've had reporters even tell me that.
Yeah.
That cover the NFL. I don't know anything. I'm like, oh, God, please. But Curran doing that, he knows the team. He also understands the opponent and what to do to attack them.
And when you cover a team, I mean, wouldn't your job just be more interesting the more you understand about football? Because, I mean, it's your job. I don't know.
People don't operate like that. So, Tom,
right.
Hats off to Tom Curran.
Yeah, and this week it's Cincinnati, by the way. So, Joe Mixon DFS lineups, maybe? I don't know. Probably teams are going to continue to attack that.
Yes, it continued to attack on the Waiver Wire show with Dr. Jene Bramel talking about injured wide receivers this week. What are we looking at, Dr. Jene?
There were no new major injuries at the wide receiver spot, but unfortunately Davante Adams on Monday was placed on the COVID reserve list after testing positive. Even though Adams is reportedly vaccinated, it's going to be very difficult for him to get the 2 negative tests he needs 24 hours apart in order to play on Thursday night's game. So doubtful at the very best you can expect him to miss this week's game. Waiting to hear how the Chargers feel Mike Williams is doing. He was able to play through a knee contusion a couple of weeks ago before the Chargers bye, but took less snaps than usual and wasn't as effective. I think we're likely to see him back at practice and back to his usual role this week. Hopefully that's the way things will go. Antonio Brown, questionable with an ankle injury, was not able to practice last week after 10 days of the Thursday night game the previous week. See whether or not he's able to return to practice. The Giants are still dealing with tons of injuries at the wide receiver spot. Sterling Shepard had a setback last week, considered week to week. You'd think he'd be doubtful to return this week. Kenny Golladay was considered a 1 to 2 week situation back in week 5 when he hyperextended his knee, has yet to be able to return to practice. Hopefully the Giants have sort of targeted this week based on their injured reserve decisions. We'll see how that goes. Kadarius Toney also dealing with ankle situations. It's being called day to day. In week to week, it's hard to tell exactly what Joe Judge thinks about some of his injured players at this point. Would consider him questionable at best. Curtis Samuel has probably still got some time off as he's dealing with an aggravated groin injury. De'Ami Brown aggravated a right knee situation that's likely to keep him out some time. Cam Sims still hasn't been practicing with a hamstring injury, so we'll see how Washington's situation progresses. T.Y. Hilton was not able to practice through a quad strain last week, still considered questionable at best to play this week. Sammy Watkins is going to get through the bye with a hamstring injury, and I think the Ravens hope they'll get him back in week 9 after their bye. Devontae Parker practiced more last week than he had been able to in the past, but still was unable to play. He's been out since week 4 with a hamstring situation. We'll also have a number of wide receivers that we're watching injured reserve situations. Still getting questions about Michael Thomas. The Saints designated many players to return coming off injured reserve after their bye week. Thomas was not among them, and he looks like he's multiple weeks away from potentially returning to practice. And as we've said for weeks now, these ankle injuries, even when surgeries, when they are cleared to return physically, sometimes take some time for players to return to full form. So this is going to be well into November before Thomas is going to be helpful for you. Jerry Jeudy should be back this week. Expect him to take full practice and return to play. Will Fuller, dealing with a finger injury, sounds like he's at least a week away, even though he's eligible to return this week. Michael Gallup on Monday was designated to return, and I think the Cowboys expect to have him coming out of their bye. News is less clear on Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who was eligible to return last week to practice and was not designated to do so. Looks like he's a little bit closer, and now with Davante Adams out, we'll see if maybe they try to turn him around quickly for the Thursday night game. Probably looking at more likely week 9. Scotty Miller dealing with a toe sprain. He was eligible to return last week. It looks like it's going to be multiple weeks. And then there are a couple of players dealing with concussions. Tyrell Williams in Detroit, D. Eskridge in Seattle, neither one of which look like they're close to being able to return.
Many thanks to Dr. Jene Bramel, and many thanks to Jerry Jeudy. If you're Teddy Bridgewater, who wasn't on the waiver wire list, Bloom, but if you're thinking his number one target's coming back, And Teddy, even in garbage time, has looked better. But imagine Jerry Jeudy being back. This is big for Teddy. It's big for the Broncos offense. And Judy's out there, 25 to 50% for him. Rashad Bateman, 20 to 40%. And Van Jefferson, let's throw him in the mix too at 15 to 30%.
And maybe Teddy should have been like 5 to 10%. You're right, because he's playing Washington this week, and the offense is going to get better with the return of Jeudy. So I feel that if you need a streamer this week or otherwise, just hope that. Well, I guess we got our answer whether Drew Lock's going to play if Teddy was playing hurt on a Thursday night. So.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Is like he's not going to get in there. If you're Drew Lock stan and you really think he can do it, then you need to just wait for his next team.
Yeah. So, and Jeudy, we chronicle him, and he's the guy that fits well with Bridgewater. Bateman, more downfield targets this time. And again, it's stunning, Cease. Again, this is one of those things where, there were people out there saying, hey, this is going to be a better passing team, or they've improved the pass offense for Lamar Jackson. But nowhere, anywhere, did anybody prognosticate that this whole offense was basically going to be on Lamar Jackson's arm. That they would just have no running game. They wouldn't attempt. Now, granted, the running back injuries had part of that story, but I think also watching Lamar Jackson grow up as a passer has been fun, or at least asked to do more, showing he can do more. Which he maybe could have done all along. Bateman can ride that wave. And then we get to Van Jefferson. See, he played like 91% of the snaps last week. He was on the field like a starting player in the Rams offense, and he's pretty good already. So with Johnny Munt's injury, they're not looking at 2 tight end sets as often. They're running 3 wide against Detroit, against a defense. You wonder why they didn't score more points, but Van Jefferson scored points in that game. So Van Jefferson, you were looking at someone, well, you need a Woods injury or a Cup injury, but that could be interesting. Well, he's interesting now already. And, of course, Rams are going to play Houston this week, so he's liable to score again, maybe more than one.
Well, all about windows, and the windows you can capture with Jarvis Landry while he's healthy, 5 to 10%. Alan Lazard, this week especially, Bloom, 5 to 10%. Khalif Raymond, love talking about him, 5 to 10% for Khalif as well. Friend of the show.
Yeah, and Landry's back. Beckham's going to keep playing with shoulder injuries. It's Case Keenum for now. It's not. Landry could save you when you need someone for a bye injury emergency plug-in, and who knows, with Koof, we may need one of those. Alan Lazard had that amazing drive, and that's it. But his value, at least in the short term, became more interesting with Devontae Adams likely out. Lazard going up against Arizona. He and Aaron Rodgers have that chemistry. And then Khalif Raymond. And this is one of those stories, Cease, again, that we like to highlight, where a player that's bounced around the league. Now, I was always going to remember Khalif Raymond for the touchdown that he scored against Baltimore in the playoffs. I mean, talk about daggers.
Yeah, right.
He was part of a great play. He was part of a pivotal play in a memorable game. But now he's really, I think, showing that he should be in the top 3 or 4 rotation for a team going forward. And an opportunity that was opened up to him because this team had to go really cheap at wide receiver, and then the players they got, Terrell Williams, hope his concussion clears up, and Brashad Perriman's not even on the team. So Khalif Raymond doing it.
Yeah, and cutting down on the drops, because you see at least 2 of those catches last week from Khalif. He wouldn't have caught those with the Broncos. Right. He would have caught those with the Titans. Like, he had, when big plays were needed, he dropped some passes. That was his kind of Achilles heel. Achilles is repaired. Happy learned how to putt. 3 to 5% for Russell Gage and Darius Slayton, and then 1% are Randall Cobb. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit higher for just this week windows. Dante Pettis also 1%. Speaking of small windows, there's Dante Pettis.
Right. Russell Gage caught a deep ball from Matt Ryan. It was a big Matt Ryan lollipop. At least we see he can still throw the ball deep. Now maybe tries to throw some posts to Calvin Ridley. I don't know. Darius Slayton, and it's just this revolving door with the Giants wide receivers, right? And outside of Kadarius Toney, I know this. Now, granted, you might say it's because Galladay wasn't healthy or something like that. But when Kadarius Toney's been on the field, he gets targeted, he produces. Everybody else, it's just this up and down merry-go-round, including injuries for everybody. Really everybody, except for Dante Pettis, right? So we bring up Slayton and Pettis, where Slayton maybe, especially if this offense gets going when Barkley comes back and it opens up the deep passing game, Slayton becomes more interesting. And Pettis is in that slot role. We're waiting Sterling Shepard to be back this week against Kansas City. And that's the other background here, right? See, like if you just have to pick up someone from the waiver wire and throw them in this week, well, going for the offense facing Kansas City is a pretty good strategy.
It's a pretty good strategy as well. Our man Diego brings up Elijah Moore, Bloom.
Yeah.
With Joe Flacco. He's excited. He's excited.
That's
and Elijah
fine.
Moore,
No, that's
incredibly
fine.
explosive. One of the players we were
You
talking
saw the
about
speed, yeah.
And we know it's like Rondell Moore, right? And so we know it's there, just like we knew with Kadarius Toney. So
yes, but see, it's funny because I thought about whether to revise the wide receiver waiver wire based on Joe Flacco, and I don't even know if he's going to start this week. We'll see. Based on Joe Flacco taking over, and you know who the receiver that popped into my head that maybe I should put in as a 1%er? Not Elijah Moore, although Elijah Moore is obviously the best raw talent in that group. It's Jamison Crowder, right? I mean, isn't that where Joe Flacco is in his career at this point? Right. If anybody blows up, because it's Jamison Crowder with a 10 for 80 game.
Let's get to the injured tight ends here in week 8 of the Waiver Wire Show, and Dr. Jene Bramel joins us once again to talk about those banged up tight ends. Dr. Jene, what do you got?
The news at the tight end position leads off with Darren Waller, who tripped over a teammate and was said to have sustained some sort of inside ankle injury or maybe even something around the heel on Friday in practice last week. Didn't look good on Saturday and then was declared inactive on Sunday. The Raiders really haven't updated his condition much. They've got a bye coming this week. Should be able to return in week 9. That would be the expectation. The same would go for Dawson Knox, who's dealing with a hand fracture, said to be a 2 to 3 week injury. So we're probably looking at week 9 at the earliest for him. Could get Rob Gronkowski back, however, who's still dealing with some rib injuries. Looks like he was running pretty comfortably in practice last week. You'd expect Tampa Bay to be finishing the reconditioning process and hope for him to be able to return. I've got him listed probable right now, but obviously has to be back to practice in some form or fashion on Wednesday or Thursday to think that that's likely to happen. Jonnu Smith for the Patriots left the game with a shoulder injury last week. The Patriots aren't likely to update that condition much for us this week. Expect some limited practice and a questionable tag. Hopefully the local media will give us some indication about whether he's able to play or not by the end of the week. Also have some tight ends that we're watching for a return. Logan Thomas dealing with a hamstring injury. He's eligible to return this week. Doesn't look like Washington thinks he's going to be able to do so. We'll see whether or not he's designated to return, but week 9 looks like his most likely early return. Albert O in Denver still dealing with a hamstring strain. It's not clear whether or not he'll be able to return. It's a chance he could return to practice this week, but he might need some time to recondition before they clear him to play. George Kittle won't be eligible to return until week 9. The Niners shut him down with the thought that he just wasn't able to recover as well as expected during the early weeks of the season when he was dealing with that calf injury. Looks like he'll have a chance to return in week 9, but still a couple of weeks away for returning for him as well.
Thanks, guys. That's what Dr. Jene said before I cut him off. He is our Captain America.
Oh, he is. I thought about this every time I'm listening to him speak during this Waiver Wire show season. There's a reason that just naturally you would cast him as a superhero, right? I just think, what would the world be like if everybody approached their job or their role in life the way Dr. Jene did? What a world that would be.
Yeah, it's utopia. That's what it would be. Utopia for your fantasy team. Speaking of you, Uzomah, right? CJ Uzomah starts off your waiver wire list. And let's throw in Ricky Seals-Jones just because I really love those two and how they're emerging. Plus, remember, he's playing Denver.
Yeah. And it's always a good bet to play your tight ends against Denver. Starting out with Uzomah. I remember Uzomah was on a decent tear early. See, there's a Freudian slip because he tore his Achilles in week 2 last year, right? And he's come back stronger and better than ever. And what you're seeing here on these two touchdown games, week 4 and week 7, and then he scored again in week 6. But in those 2 touchdown games, it's Joe Burrow and that hyper accuracy. And I love it, Cease, because LSU Joe Burrow's back. And what I mean is playing in the eye of the storm, negotiating the pocket, and making those hyper accurate throws to set up run after catch opportunities that are almost unfair. It's a special quality that only a few quarterbacks have. Tom Brady has it. Maybe this is the superpower that I underestimate Brady whenever sometimes I've brought out the haters. it's the way that if the receiver just follows the trajectory of the ball, they'll run to space. The quarterback is actually playing a game within the game. And Joe Burrow's doing that on these throws to CJ Uzomah, because CJ Uzomah is not one of the 5 best run after catch tight ends in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of incredible athletes at tight end. Not that Uzomah's unathletic, but he's just following the path. And the other thing is, on none of these plays, do I think Uzomah's close to the first read, right?
No, God, no.
And that's again, I think that's LSU Burrow. So it's not quite as frenetic as Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes outside of structure. It's much more subtle, but it is outside of structure in a way, because it's not just based on the play call or execution of the players running their routes. It's based on Burrow, and Uzomah's the guy benefiting from it. So yeah, when you have 2 touchdowns as a top end range of possibilities, you'll suffer through a catch or 2 game. I'm fine with Uzomah in your lineup from here on out.
Nah, I'm fine with that. Fine with Ricky Seals-Jones again.
Yep.
Going up
sure.
against
And
that.
Logan Thomas isn't back yet, and he's a wide receiver. And wasn't there the story that he encountered somebody who said, "Hey."
It was Eric Dickerson.
Right, you told
Eric
that story.
Dickerson said you're lazy. Yeah, I talked about it on the recap show.
Yeah, and I just think that that's one of the, again, a wonderful story where, and what it means for fantasy football is we can't just think like, oh, this is just a fluke or he'll go back into the background. Maybe he will when Logan Thomas is back this year, but I think Ricky Seals-Jones has arrived.
Mm-hmm. I think he's arrived and he's flourishing. You're like, your fantasy team can flourish if you get Robert Tonyan, again, Windows. And, well, think of this week on a short week and maybe no Devontae Adams, 7 to 15%, Evan Ingram, 5 to 10%. Let's round out the list with some Mo Alley Cox and some Foster Moreau, who's always been a good tight end. Speaking of LSU, right?
Totally. Tonyan, Devontae Adams probably not playing. Tonyan is warm, could get hot. Evan Ingram, and this isn't, I think, what the Giants envisioned Cease when he went in the first round to them, but it's okay. He's not hurting the team. He's not frustrating to watch, and it's producing modest fantasy returns. Again, wondering if this offense is going to be ascendant before the end of the year. Everybody knows how much I love Mo Alley Cox. It's fun to watch that dude play, and he's just scoring touchdowns. I think Carson Wentz can see that, hey, it's a good idea to throw around the big man and let him do his thing. Not exactly a massive fancy breakout or a season changer, but somebody who can help. And again, these offenses coming up, Tennessee and other AFC South offenses you want to play against. Foster Moreau, and this one's going into the bye. Waller's going to probably be back. Moreau's value evaporates, but you never know. I mean, there's always re-injury. There's always players coming back slow from things. And I just think that we have to emphasize here that Moreau can play, he can produce, and it's going to happen at some point down the line. Maybe not with the Raiders. So this has been a good pick. Was it probably a Mayock pick, third day pixies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Mayock pick. So there you go, coming through, making plays for those Raiders. Now, to all of you out there, we give you the Keanu kiss as always, Bloom. And you said it earlier, like some people may not be here for the fantasy football advice just to hang out. That's cool. But I think also this is kind of it's a tipping point, right? How many buzzwords can I fit into this sentence? The tipping point outside the paradigm and the box and the thinking outside the box. Because you may be 1-6, you may be 2-5. Don't make me do math, but your fantasy season's teetering on the edge.
Right.
But you want to give it one more try because maybe you can get that last spot in the playoffs. This is normally the time of year where you see, fantasy interest maybe drop off and DFS interest go a little bit higher, but still fight. Still swing your sword, still be that spoiler if you want to, right, in your fantasy leagues. But in order to do that, sometimes you have to trim the fat. I am on a diet currently where I don't really feel deprived, Bloom, of my diet with soda weight loss, official diet supplement nutrient company of the Dallas Cowboys. Anyway, but you got to trim the fat. You feel better. You got more energy. So trim the fat from your fantasy roster, have more energy, and scream it to the heavens wherever you're at, and join in with us now for our audience participation. When you say it with me, to cue the Bloom or some of your week 8 shadow downs.
Yeah. I love that you revisited the idea of playing spoiler and finding some motivation. And another way I'll put it is just think of how you regard the teams that you see that quit as the season goes on. Don't be that team in your fantasy league. Don't do that. Still go out there, chase the prize. And we get to shut them down, Cease. And like you said, trim the fat. Although I'm going to turn it around and be much more sentimental and say, one of the things that strikes me this week for some reason is that some of these players we're going to talk about, when they're players that are on shut them down, okay? And I'm not talking about the players that were shutting down because of injury or players that we thought maybe might have some opportunity and get it. I'm talking about the players that we drafted, Cease. I'm talking about players that were shutting down that we drafted. Maybe drafted pretty high in our draft. And when we're shutting down players like that in fantasy leagues, they're probably at a mental confidence crossroads in their career, where they have to figure out how to get through the disappointment. Because if we're disappointed, they're disappointed.
You're talking about Miles Sanders, aren't you?
Anybody, right? I mean, Odell Beckham, Allen Robinson. You know what I mean? These are players that have to find a way to fight through this. I think that we underestimate how much players hear and absorb like what is beamed at them, and have to do something with it, right? I mean, it has to go somewhere. It has to manifest in some way, and so it's shut them down. A little sentiment here for some of these guys, because including Ryan Fitzpatrick. Again, if he's still on crutches, man, I really look forward to watching him. Sam Darnold, I don't see any reason to stick him in my lineup at this point. I'd probably play Case Keenum over him. So of course in your 2 quarterback superflex leagues, you're not going to drop any starter, right? Justin Fields, same thing. And the Justin Fields thing, that's another one, Cease, that like he's got to fight through this. My official Justin Fields take was I would advise him to fake and invent an injury at this point. Which is a weird full circle thing back to like why he fell in the draft. Not that there was any truth to any of that. Anyway, we go to running back Mike Davis. I mean, it was cool for a little bit. Looked like he was going to get an opportunity to show. Well, then Cordell Patterson says, "No, that's mine." I think that even there may be a game or two where he does something, but he's basically an injury upside hold at this point, and maybe not even a very good one. Damian Williams, same thing. I don't know what to do with Ramondre Stevenson. I have this thing with shut them downs. It's like when a player's a healthy scratch, I mean, wow, there better be something compelling there if we're not making them a shut them down. And is this compelling? I mean, maybe the Patriots offense is becoming compelling, but I just don't know in any given week what I'm going to get from Stevenson. Wide receiver, so here we are, right? Odell Beckham. And these are the true cue the Chuck D guys, right? Odell Beckham, Allen Robinson. And look, it is truly a cathartic shut them down. It is from a sense like, I don't want to have to think about this anymore. I don't want to have to think about whether to drop them or hold them. I don't want to have to think about whether to play them. Beckham's playing through 2 shoulder injuries. Allen Robinson, I mean, I don't know what Allen Robinson did in a past life that has caused this to be his NFL career. I know he's made a lot of money. I'm not really shedding a tear for him. I hope for some resolution for him. Tim Patrick, I think at this point sees. I mean, I know that there could be something there, but I'm not afraid of what Tim Patrick's going to do on my bench. I'm going to try something else with that roster spot. And then at tight end, O.J. Howard, it was nice for a second. And Jonnu Smith, we're to our annual Jonnu Smith injury, just as he was starting to look like he was getting integrated into the offense downfield and making plays.
And on the flip side of shut them down, you got to fire up the drums because there's some players you just can't say no to. You got to keep them. You got to hold on. And in week 8, Bloom, who are some of those? Hold on.
Yeah, it's getting hard. So I actually had Miles Sanders as a hold on. I really did.
Wow.
Well, because he's not going on injured reserve. He's looking good. He had just seized the role. So I'm probably this is one where like next week or whatever, when he comes back, and then it's the same, because I just felt like things were starting to turn in his favor. Both in terms of the workload, how he was playing, and then he got hurt. If he goes on IR, obviously, he's a drop. A.J. Dillon, I'm just, don't do anything too hasty. He had that fumble. Kylan Hill's interesting. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me in the least bit, Cease, if we do see Kylan Hill pass A.J. Dillon at some point. Just thinking about the two of them as college prospects and not bringing in draft capital or anything like that, because that can skew what happens, or at least in terms of opportunity. I mean, they're in the relative same galaxy of talent, I think. even though Hill fell in the draft based on like Hill at his best and Dillon at his best. But for now, I'm holding on to A.J. Dillon. Just too much upside there. Julio Jones, and Cecil is going to be like, come on, really? But, Tennessee, I think if Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City offense had played better and they had passed more, Julio could have had a fine game. And Julio looked good. I mean, he looked like Julio on the plays. I just want to see him stay off the injury report. And again, with Tennessee, it's the same thing we were saying about Indianapolis. They're going to get the AFC South matchups. They're going to have some potential for big games. So I'm still erring on the side of, like if you said drop Julio for Van Jefferson, like Van Jefferson's interesting, but Julio's more interesting.
Do you know who Kylan Hill is?
Who is he?
Kristen Michael.
Ooh. Yeah.
Right? It's just one of those, like, I know he's talented. I'm just waiting.
Yeah.
And, well, with Michael, we were waiting, and then we're excited, and then we're waiting, and then we're excited.
He's one of my radio spots. He still continues to be like an inside joke,
Really?
Well, it's because Kristen Michael, like there were so many times that things lined up for him, including getting drafted in the second round to begin with, which I think shocked all of us, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing about him, of course, was, a la Chris Henry, Chris Henry, who I believe is still alive, not the Chris Henry who passed away, rest in peace. You can have all of the measurables in the world. Like Kristen Michael had all the measurables. He was a prototype physically, and it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate. You got to have skill.
Gotta have skill. Speaking of which, Tyler asking about Michael Gallup.
Yeah.
Could be back this week. And again, look at the Yahoo leagues. He's available in like 50% of leagues, which there's no way in hell he should be. But again, Yahoo leagues, short benches, whatever. Gallup is I'd
probably put him in like a 5 to 10%. Yeah. I mean, I would still pick up Van Jefferson over him. My only hesitation on Gallup is just that this is not going to be a pass heavy offense. Now we can see that they're a very balanced offense, and it was Lamb and Cooper had their ups and downs. So you add Gallup back to the mix. Dalton Schultz is Dak Prescott's favorite target, it appears.
That's right. Who's our favorite target? You. Because we love you and we appreciate all of you. Make sure to help out the show by doing all those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid, and check out footballguys.com for all of your fantasy football goodness and information. It's footballguys.com. Upper right corner says join now, join us, annual subscription, very good price. And thank you for being a Football Guys subscriber. We couldn't do this show without you. So thanks again for checking out footballguys.com. He is Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. The show is at the Audible. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying thanks. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.